Long ago, in the city of Mecca, the valleys were made of dry earth and sharp black stones. It was a place where the sun was not just a light in the sky, but a heavy weight on the shoulders of anyone who walked beneath it. In this harsh land, family was everything. Among the clans of the Quraysh, there was a man named Abu Talib. He was a noble man, a leader of his people, but he was not rich. He had a large family and many mouths to feed. But there was one child in his house who was not his own son, yet Abu Talib loved him more than his own children. This boy was his nephew, Muhammad. The young Muhammad had known sadness very early. His father, Abdullah, had passed away before he was even born. His mother, Amina, died when he was just 6 years old. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, who took him in next, also passed away. And so, at the tender age of 8, he came into the care of his uncle, Abu Talib. Abu Talib noticed something different about this boy. In a city where children were often loud and greedy for food, Muhammad was quiet. He was content. He never grabbed for food. When he sat with the family, he brought a sense of peace that Abu Talib could not explain. The uncle grew so attached to the nephew that he could not bear to sleep unless the boy was sleeping near him. He could not bear to eat unless the boy was eating with him. Time passed, and the boy grew to be 12 years old. The season for the great trade journey arrived. In Mecca, the men would organize huge caravans, lines of camels loaded with leather, perfumes, and goods, to travel north to Syria, which was then called Sham. It was a dangerous journey. It took weeks to cross the empty, burning desert. There were bandits, wild animals, and the killer heat. Abu Talib began to prepare his saddle. He checked his supplies. He gathered the goods he would sell. The house was busy with the noise of preparation. But in the corner, the young Muhammad stood silently, watching his uncle. His eyes were filled with sadness. When the day of departure came, the camels were kneeling on the sand, grunting as heavy loads were tied to their backs. The men shouted orders. The dust rose in the air. Abu Talib adjusted his cloak and prepared to mount his camel. Suddenly, he felt a tug at his clothes. He looked down. It was Muhammad. The boy was holding onto his uncle's robe, his eyes filled with tears. He did not speak, but his face said everything. He was an orphan who had lost everyone he loved. And now, the one person who protected him was leaving for months, perhaps never to return. Abu Talib's heart melted. He looked at the dangerous desert ahead, and then he looked at the tearful face of his nephew. The other men warned him, "The journey is too hard for a child. Leave him here." But Abu Talib shook his head. He reached down and lifted the boy up, seating him on the camel behind him. "By God," Abu Talib said, "I will not leave him behind. He will go with me, and we will not be parted." And so, the journey began. The miracle in the desert. The caravan moved like a snake across the golden ocean of sand. Days turned into weeks. The routine was always the same. Wake up before the sun, travel while the air was cool, and stop when the sun became a ball of fire in the sky. The Arabian desert is not a forgiving place. At noon, the heat rises from the ground like invisible flames. The travelers would wrap their faces in cloth to protect themselves. They would squint their eyes against the glare. The heat was exhausting. It drained the energy of the strongest men. But the men in the caravan began to notice something strange. Usually, the sun beats down on everyone equally, but they noticed that around Abu Talib's camel, the air seemed different. One afternoon, a man riding near the back of the group looked up. The sky was a piercing blue, empty of clouds. Except for one. It was a small, dense white cloud. It wasn't drifting away with the wind. It wasn't dissolving in the heat. It was floating directly above the young boy, Muhammad. The man rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a trick of the heat. He watched closely. The caravan turned left. The cloud moved left. The caravan sped up. The cloud sped up. As the hours passed, the sun moved across the sky, but the cloud adjusted its position. It was always perfectly placed to cast a cool, dark shadow over the boy. While the other men wiped sweat from their foreheads and drank warm water from their leather bags, the young Muhammad sat calmly, cool and protected. It was as if the heavens themselves were holding a parasol over him. The boy did not boast about it. He did not point it out. He simply sat with that quiet dignity he always had, observing the creation of God, the sand, the rocks, the horizon, while the creation of God served him. Part 3. The Watcher in the Tower. Far away, near the town of Busra in Syria, there stood a lonely monastery. It was a tall stone building where a monk named Bahira lived. Bahira was a very learned man. He was a Christian scholar who had spent his life reading old, crumbling books and scrolls. These books were passed down from generation to generation of monks. They contained secrets and prophecies. Bahira spent his days praying and reading. He knew that a final prophet was coming. The books described this prophet clearly: his lineage, his face, his time, and the signs that would accompany him. Bahira had spent years looking out of his narrow window, watching the caravans from Arabia pass by, hoping to see a sign. But for years, he saw nothing but dust and traders, until this day. Bahira was looking out of his cell window. In the distance, he saw the dust of a caravan approaching. It looked like any other group of Meccan traders. But then Bahira gasped. He saw the cloud. From his high tower, he could see what the men on the ground could not fully understand. He saw that the cloud was behaving with purpose. It was locked onto one specific rider. Could it be? Bahira whispered to himself. He watched the caravan come closer. They stopped near a cluster of trees, not far from his monastery, to take a midday break. The travelers climbed off their camels. Bahira watched the young boy get off his camel and walk toward an old tree. The tree was dry and sparse. Its branches were high and offered little shade. But as the boy sat down at the base of the trunk, the impossible happened. Before Bahira's eyes, the stiff, wooden branches of the tree groaned and bent downwards. They lowered themselves until they formed a perfect canopy over the boy, sheltering him completely. The leaves seemed to cluster together to block out every ray of sun. Bahira pulled back from the window, his heart racing. The cloud, the tree, these were not coincidences. These were the signs written in his ancient manuscripts. The stones and trees would only bow for a prophet. He had to be sure. The feast. Bahira did something he never did. He ran down from his tower and ordered his servants to prepare a large meal. "Cook everything we have," he ordered. "Invite the travelers. All of them." The servants were confused. Bahira usually hated visitors, but they obeyed. Bahira went out to the caravan leaders. "O people of the Quraysh," he called out, "I have prepared food for you. I want you all to come, the old and the young, the free men and the slaves." The men were surprised. "By God, Bahira," one of them said, "you have never done this before. What has changed today?" Bahira just smiled and said, "You are guests. I wish to honor you." The men, hungry from their journey, happily agreed. They washed the dust from their faces and entered the cool monastery dining hall. They sat down and began to eat. Bahira walked among them. He scanned every face. He looked at their eyes, their foreheads, their hands. He was comparing them to the description in his mind. He looked at the leaders. No. He looked at the servants. No. He looked at the guards. No. None of them had the light. None of them carried the presence of a prophet. Bahira began to panic. Had he been wrong? Had the signs lied? He stopped and asked the leaders, "Is everyone here? Did you bring everyone?" The men looked around. "Yes, we are all here," one said. Then he paused. "Well, except for one boy. We left the youngest one behind by the camels to watch our luggage." Bahira's eyes widened. "Do not do that," he insisted. "Go and get him. Bring him to this meal. No one must be left behind." The men laughed a little at the monk's insistence, but they went to fetch the boy. When the young Muhammad walked through the door, the room seemed to change. Bahira stared at him. He saw a face that shone like the moon. He saw eyes that were dark and deep. He saw a walk that was humble yet strong. The description in the books fit him like a key fits a lock. Bahira did not speak yet. He let the boy eat. He watched how he ate, with manners, with grace, not greedily like a starving traveler. After the meal was over and the men were relaxing, Bahira approached the boy gently. He wanted to test him. "Young man," Bahira said, "I ask you by Lat and Uzza, the two main idols the Arabs worshipped, to answer my questions." The boy's face changed. He looked at the monk with a flash of dislike. "Do not ask me by Lat and Uzza," the boy said firmly. "By God, there is nothing I hate more than these idols." Bahira smiled. This was the first proof. The boy was a monotheist by nature. His heart rejected idol worship, even though he was raised in a city of idols. "Then I ask you by Allah," Bahira said. "Ask what you wish," the boy replied. Bahira began to ask him personal questions. "What do you see when you sleep? What do you feel when you are alone? What are your dreams?" The boy answered every question, and every answer matched exactly what was written in the secret scrolls of the monastery. Finally, Bahira asked for one last thing. "May I see your back?" The boy nodded. He lowered his garment slightly. Bahira looked between the boy's shoulder blades. There, on the pale skin, was a raised piece of flesh, like a birthmark, around the size of a pigeon's egg. It had hair growing on it. It was the seal of prophethood. Bahira gasped. It was exactly where the old prophets said it would be. This was him. This was the Ahmed, the Muhammad, the praised one. The warning. Bahira covered the boy's back and turned to the man. He found Abu Talib. "Who is this boy to you?" Bahira asked. Abu Talib, feeling protective, said, "He is my son." In Arab culture, an uncle often called his nephew son out of affection. Bahira shook his head vigorously. "No," the monk said. "He cannot be your son. The father of this boy should not be alive. The books say he must be an orphan." Abu Talib was shocked by the monk's knowledge. "You are right," he admitted. "He is my nephew. His father died before he was born." "And his mother?" Bahira asked. "She died when he was young."
"Uncle, come quick."
Bahira nodded solemnly. "You speak the truth." Then the monk stepped closer to Abu Talib, his voice dropping to a serious, urgent whisper. The playful atmosphere of the feast vanished. "Listen to me closely," Bahira said. "Take your nephew back to his country immediately. Do not take him farther into Syria, and guard him carefully against the enemies." "Why?" asked Abu Talib, frightened. "Because," Bahira said, looking at the boy who was sitting quietly across the room, "if the people of Rome or the enemies of truth see what I have seen, if they recognize the signs I have recognized, they will try to kill him. They will not want a prophet to rise from the Arabs." Bahira paused, his eyes tearing up. "Great things are in store for this nephew of yours. His name will be known from the east to the west. He will change the world." The return. Abu Talib was shaken. He looked at his beloved nephew in a new light. He realized that the strange cloud and the bending tree were not just random magic. They were protections for a soul that was precious to the heavens. Abu Talib did not finish his trade journey that year. He sold his goods quickly in Basra at a lower price, not caring for the profit. His only concern now was the safety of Muhammad. They packed their camels. The journey home seemed faster, fueled by Abu Talib's anxiety to get the boy back to the safety of the sanctuary in Mecca. As they rode away from the monastery, Bahira stood in his tower one last time. He watched the caravan disappear into the dust. He knew he would likely never see the boy again. He would be an old man by the time the boy declared his prophethood. But Bahira's heart was at peace. He had seen the chosen one. And as the caravan moved south, back toward the heat of the desert, the small white cloud returned. It hovered faithfully over the boy, shading him, protecting him, waiting for the day when he would be called to call all of mankind.